We get a weather update at 11 o'clock from the Met Office through to our gritting controller at Newark. He'll relay that message to the four foremen, which I'm one of, and then we relay that down to our crew that we are in charge of. That'll give you the time that we're supposed to be in the yard, the spread rate that we're supposed to be spreading at, and the weather forecast and what they're expecting and what time we're going out due to the weather. We go out with a said lorry full of salt, could be up to 10-12 tons on the back, and away you go. You spread it down, and you want to be putting it down a couple of hours at least before the forecast of it's going to drop cold, to help the traffic crush it down into the tarmac. And then hopefully when it goes freezing, it'll not freeze, it just moistens it up again nicely. It's all down to the weight of the traffic and everything else. It's quite a pleasure to be out there. You know you're doing the best that you can. You're putting the salt out there. You're trying to make the roads safe. You're just in your own little world. You know what you've got to do. You put the radio on, heater's nice and warm, and you're away and enjoying it, and off you go. It's peaceful.
I like my job, and I've been a mental health nurse for it's more than 40 years. I'm not going to give my age away. September last year, I was walking my dog, and she happened to pick a fight with another dog. During that fight, I intervened, and I was bitten by either of the dogs, I don't know which. As a consequence of that, I contracted sepsis with quite a virulent bacteria. Essentially, went into shock, lots of organ failure, and the result of all that is what they call a quad amputation. All of my life I've been very independent. I never felt as if I'd lose it. I always just thought, and I still do, it's something you're constantly working towards. My wife's the gardener, not me. Used to do the heavy jobs. Yeah, the carer thing is quite important. I think the big thing for Anne has always been, if I know the help's there and how to access it, then that makes me feel better already. When I was considered to be medically fit before I was actually discharged, this rather nice man called Nadeem turned up, and he explained that he was the hospital social worker. He explained the concept of social care. As soon as we started the assessment, it was obvious that we were also going in a direction.
What makes me proud about working within the hospital setting is having the opportunity to work with hospital OTs, physiotherapists, doctors, working with the individual to meet that individual's need collectively. Crucially, the individual is the heart of the work that we do.
The right services were put in place in a very caring way. Nadeem was the hub. Essentially, it did feel like a joined-up approach.
I think Julian naturally is a confident man, and I think it was about trying to ensure that we harness that positivity that Julian has. The strategy offers us opportunity to work with individuals around their needs and promote their confidence and independence, and allows them structure and control to think about the services that they want and how they want to live independently within the community.
All the services that I need have been provided, and I feel well cared for. The difference that adult social care has made is the difference between being in an institution and being miserable and being at home and being happy.
My life was a bit of a struggle. I've always wanted to do things like be out and about, meeting new people, Basically, my head was all over the place.
I started working with Shane in May 2017. His social worker in the transitions team referred him to the Knots Enabling Service. I know that Knots Enabling Service have changed Shane's pathway for the better. His social worker told me that he was planning to commission 2 days of day services for Shane. And now what we have is someone who's happy with their life, working hard, getting paid, and for those other 5 days a week not being bored, sat at home.
Ever since me and Aidan have been talking, ever since I've called him my brother, he's shown me some good skills, he's a nice lad. I can't have no one better than him, because he's quality.
I quickly found out that Shane was very good with people and his social skills were great. He always makes me laugh. He wanted to do some gardening and also he wanted to help people, which is why he did some volunteering at the community gardens. I increase a person's confidence by focusing on what strengths they do have, because I believe if you focus on things that interest someone, you're likely to get the best out of them.
I have the confidence to actually do something now in my life.
I'm proud that I've enabled someone to be able to do those things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do.
Okay, whilst we're waiting for that, I'm still getting some.
Chairman, live now.
Okay, thank you. I'm just getting some sound from Councillor Dobson's microphone. I don't know if anyone can mute her because she can't.
I have muted her, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. Okay, so welcome to this afternoon's Finance and Major Contracts Committee. My name's Richard Jackson. I'm the chair of the committee. We've a number of other councillors, and in order, that's Councillor John Ogle and Roger Jackson, who are the two vice chairs of the committee. And councillors John Clark, Keith Girling, Tom Hollis, Eric Kerry, Diana Meal, Mike Pringle, Alan Rhodes and Gordon Wheeler. As ever, we'll endeavour, there's somebody from IT on the call, we'll endeavour to make sure that members they're connected throughout. If there is an issue, we'll try and make contact as soon as possible, and we'll avoid going to a vote until we're confident we've got everybody on the call, as you would expect. If I might start with the minutes of the meeting from the 18th of January, I'll formally move those as correct.
Formally second, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll take that by exception. There's nobody against that. If I can move on to apologies for absence, I'm not aware of any.
There's no apologies, Chairman.
Thank you. And so are there any declarations of interest by members or by officers on the agenda this afternoon? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So I'll move to item 4, which is the budget report. Members have had this to obviously read in advance, and I'll ask Nigel Stevenson to introduce the report and whether there's anything to add, Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman. This year's budget report is presented to this committee within a context of continuing financial challenges facing local government, especially in light of the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on the council in supporting our communities, costs and loss of income, and the wider impacts upon the economy. The second year with a 1-year funding settlement, the uncertainty of the outcome for public finances post-Brexit, demographic pressures on our social care services, especially in children's social care, delays in the implementation of the Fair Funding Review and the 75% business rates retention, and the stalled progress on the paper on adult social care. This report sets this context, especially the significant impacts of COVID-19 upon the Council's services and finances, and the considerable funding provided by government. It sets out the changes to the underlying assumptions in the Medium-Term Financial Strategy, or MTFS, the planned changes to the capital programme, and sets out the proposals on council tax and the adult social care precept. Despite the challenging financial position that the Council has experienced over recent years and the substantial financial challenges this year, it continues to perform well in many areas, including supporting the most vulnerable people in our communities through COVID-19 crisis. 4 new replacement schools have been built or in the process of being built in Bestwood, the Orchard Special School, Hucknall, and Rosecliff Spencer Academy in Edwalton. We have a good Ofsted inspection of children's social care. We've maintained our vital social care services. We've increased investment in the highways infrastructure across the County Council, continued investment in the local bus network and library provision, to name but a few. The report sets out the Council's strategic approach, balancing the increasing demand on its services, the need to reflect its environment strategy, and the need to balance its finances. The transformation plan sets out last October builds upon the Council's strategic plan, and all are built on the sound financial management, something that was recognised in the peer review conducted in June 2019. It is easy to overlook the Council's ambitions on the environment. The report reminds colleagues of our environment strategy and policy and how we will continue to measure our progress. On the 25th of November last year, the Chancellor of the Exchequer delivered the Spending Round 2020. On the 17th of December last year, the Provisional Local Government Settlement was announced by the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, the Right Honourable Robert Jenrick MP. The settlement confirmed many of the announcements made in the Spending Round 2020. The final local government settlement was published last week and will be debated in the House of Commons on Wednesday. Points to note from this latter statement are the 1.4 billion of social care grants in 2020-21 will be rolled forward and now includes an additional 300 million. The council tax threshold will remain at 1.99%, but there will be further flexibility for adult social care precept of 3%, of which part may be deferred to the following year. Government signalled further support to councils for the effects of COVID-19 into 2021-22, with a 1.55 billion of additional grant, compensation for 75% of irrecoverable loss of council tax and business rates revenues, sales fees and charges compensation, and 670 million of local council tax support. Now, a further 1.7 billion for pothole repairs and road maintenance, which we are still waiting for the announcements in the detail for next year. There will be ongoing costs to the council next year as we continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is welcome that the government has recognised this in the settlement, providing an additional 16 million of funding to us, together with support for the impacts on council tax collection and tax base erosion, as well as ongoing provision of PPE. It would appear from our viewpoint that our lobbying has been successful, and the government's promise to meet our costs in response or in responding to COVID-19 has been met. The true impacts of COVID-19 on next year's budget is uncertain, which mirrors the uncertainty of the pandemic itself. For now, I have assumed the government will continue to recognise its obligations and continue to fund the impacts of COVID-19 through next year. However, there is a risk, and this risk is reflected in the budget report. In the budget report in February 2019, the forecast a budget gap of 28.3 million for the 3 years to 2023-24. Since then, a rigorous review of the Council's MTFS has taken place, including the MTFS has been rolled forward a year to reflect the 4-year term to 2024-25, the challenge on the assumptions of pressures and inflation, a review of efficiency savings, tax-based changes, council tax surpluses and deficits, and the position on government grant levels, the details of which are set out in the report. As in previous years, the Council is considering how best it can use reserves and balances and the flexibility in the use of capital receipts in order to allow more time for more transformative approaches to be developed and implemented. As in previous years, the government, as part of the settlement, included an annual assumption that council tax would increase, and it also continued with the use of the adult social care precept, in some recognition of the increasing demand and cost for adult social care. The government's announcement on the increases in core funding for local government is predicting an increase on council tax of 1.99% and the adult social care precept by 3% in 21-22. As I stated last year, the model for local government funding continues to reflect the move from central government funding to locally raised taxation. In light of the financial difficulties faced by the council, particularly from increased demand, this report sets out the proposals for a council tax increase in line with the government expectation of 1.99% for 2021-22. This assumption is already in our MTFS. In addition, due to the significant financial pressure upon adult social care, this report sets out a proposal to increase the adult social care precept. However, the proposal is to increase this by 1% for 21-22 and defer the remaining 2% to the following year. The overall increase over the 2 years of 3% is in line with government expectations. The overall impact upon the MTFS is shown at Table 6 on page 11 of the report. The revised funding gap over the 4 years of the MTFS is estimated to be 47.7 million. There are a number of significant financial risks, and these are also set out in the report. The report also sets out the proposals for the revised capital programme for the next 4 years, with continued investment in our highways, including the major investment in the GAR, schools and special school places, broadband, unlocking sites for housing, investing in Nottinghamshire, green initiatives including carbon management and energy saving schemes and flood mitigation projects. Details of the capital programme, together with a profile of anticipated capital receipts, are set out in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I'll move the recommendations, which are on page 20.
Second, Chairman.
Thank you, John. And I'll put Councillor Hollis, and then we'll open it up to any other questions or comments. Tom.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nigel. And I think, Nigel, we all know you're a fantastic officer, and that's not flattery. You always answer us calls and make sure you're up to speed on anything. But while we think this is a great report, the Ashfield Independent, I think it's, if you were to compare Nigel to a Formula One racing driver, it's like the creativity has just been completely sucked out of this whole suggestions. It's almost like Lewis Hamilton turning up to a Formula One race and finding out he's got a Ford KA to drive around the track, Mr. Chairman, because I seriously think, as we've said in all budget reports so far, there's no creativity in this whatsoever. There's no looking into alternative income streams other than dipping their hands in people's pockets by raising council tax and asking the government for a handout, which I never believed was the Conservatives' ethos. As a businessly minded party, I'm surprised to see there's no extra regeneration of income streams. As I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, you won't mind me pointing out that the Labour Party do extremely well at Nottingham City Council, and the Ashfield Independents do well at Ashfield District. And I think actually they're the kind of things that I believe are missing in this report. So lack of creativity would be my first frustration, I believe. Then I'm also frustrated, obviously, with the need, the seemingly desperate need that you always feel to raise council tax. It's not something that I believed, if you'd have been more creative, that we'd have had to do. It's certainly something that Ashfield Council aren't doing. And I really believe that you could have found ways without having to ask people to spend in a normal house in Nottinghamshire an extra £50 this year on top of the money that you raised from them last year. And that's on top of the police raising it £15, the fire authority another few pounds. It's a real kick in the teeth for people while they're really struggling. Our council's struggling, but so are the residents in Nottinghamshire, Mr. Chairman. And this report's asking them to pay more for less service. And then another frustration is in paragraph 61 of your report, New Homes England. I think it just reminds me, Mr. Chairman, that seemingly your disregard for Ashfield as a district which we close services, so the Shore Start centres get closed, the recycling centres don't get reopened and reinvested in as we've asked for, yet you can use us as a dumping ground for a number of properties. 64 acres across Ashfield and the nearby plots in Mansfield will be developed under this plan. I really don't think it's fair, because as in Hucknall, that money just gets completely swallowed up into the county council and spent elsewhere. If you are going to do something like this to our district, and I'm sure Councillor Neil may have a few words to say on it as well, but Ashfield and Mansfield aren't a dumping ground for the Conservative Party to raise money for the county. And if you are going to do something positive like building properties, I'd like to see some of that money ring-fenced for the area that's going to have to stomach some of the pain, almost similar to what a 106 would be in a planning application. So I'd like to see that, bearing in mind that we're a public body, not a cash grabber. And I'd also like to raise the irony, and frankly, I look to you, Mr. Chairman, on this as probably the future leadership of your party after the election. It's well known that the Conservative leader of the group is a climate change denier. So I had to smile at paragraph 70 with the green initiatives. And while I agree with everything that's been said in there, I really do look to you, Mr. Chairman, as I suspect who's going to be leading the group after the election, to actually show some leadership on this and come out and make clear to your current leader that we do believe climate change is a problem, and we stand wholeheartedly behind paragraph 70 in this report, and we're going to do something about it. And I'll save the rest of my comments for the debate. But I'm sure I've made myself quite clear, and I genuinely mean those as constructive comments, Mr. Chairman, because I know while we all might have different views of how we're going to do it with the budget, I know it's a responsibility that's tough to shoulder, but we all want the same thing. We want to see the county run in a better place, investments made in the best way possible. I just fundamentally believe this isn't the best way possible. And I think I'll end with a question. Social care. We spent £12 million more on social care than we raised in council tax last year. It is a crisis, Mr. Chairman, of social care. What are we going to do about it? And do you believe it's sustainable to go on in that way? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I did raise an eyebrow at you holding up Nottingham City Council as an exemplar in generating income and managing their finances. It doesn't quite look like that from my point of view. A number of things that you raised, I think, will be dealt with when we come to the budget debate in 2 and a bit weeks' time. I would point out Ashfield, Mansfield, anywhere else aren't dumping grounds for new housing. But there's a lot of money gone into infrastructure at Topwick as part of the external funding which we gained. And if you drive past Topwick, you can actually see that, because work on that junction is going on now. And in the usual way, there'll be money for local infrastructure and the pressures that arise from that development, partly in Gedling and partly in Ashfield. I think we've dealt with that many times over. As far as paragraph 70 goes, yes, of course I stand behind it. I stand behind every paragraph in this paper. We've got a good record over the last 4 years of action on climate change and action on improving the environment in Nottinghamshire, and we look forward to carrying that on. So certainly don't recognise the description that I'm a climate change denier or that my group is full of climate change deniers. I've got Councillor Clark, John.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of items. Like Tom could go on quite a piece on this one, but it's just really we've got roads maintenance down at 100 million there, which is quite an eye-watering figure, and I know we need that because the poor. Also, a possible grant of 2.5 million. And I'd link this with the other bit I was going to say. It's about the street lighting, 6.3 million. Can we really look at that and see whether we are getting best value? Because I'm disappointed. I was quite heartened last year about the roads. Excuse me, Jim. About the roads and the repairs, we seem to be okay. But I know you get to know your potholes and you get to know what you've put in. And you look what's been done, and then I look again. And over this last winter, which has been pretty wet, there's no doubt in that. And now we've got the snow. But there's significant damage because they don't seem to have been repaired properly. So I know it's an old chestnut this, but there are some great big holes there that need sorting out. I just wonder whether we're getting the best value, whether we do actually look at it and see, is it really working? Is the magic machine that digs it out, swishes it around, puts it back in working? And on the street light, I'm getting really concerned about LED lighting, which is a big saviour, there's no doubt in that, on the amount of energy we need. But some of the lights now, it's so dark on some of the streets where we've had the lights in for 2 or 3 years. I don't know whether we do a check or whether there is a proper check by whoever, does the maintenance on them. But it seems to me that a lot of them are on half power. So you've only got a few on. So significant problems there for the general public. There are just 2 things there I think we could possibly look at and say we could do something better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. We're investing more in the roads than we ever have done, and we didn't record extra investment at the beginning of this 4-year term when we were repairing the roads. We're repairing more potholes than we've ever repaired. But I think it's acknowledged there's a long-standing and backdated problem, backlog of repairs that are necessary. We're doing what we can, and I think we're getting good value for money. And I think we've moved away from products like ViaFix, which was never a particularly popular way of repairing the roads, onto better, more permanent repairs. And I know Councillor Cottage is some different machinery sometime in the next few days, actually. So it's a constant battle to be on top of the new technology that's coming along to repair the roads. As far as street lighting goes, I guess it's a question for the Place Committee to look at the ins and outs of street lighting. I'm sure there is an inspection regime on street lights to make them working. From personal experience, when I had roads in my patch that moved over to LED lighting, I got complaints in the first week or 2, and actually then, and it was the same just outside my house here. After a week, got quite used to it. So I'm not personally getting complaints about it at the moment, but it's probably something that the Place Committee would look at if there is. I've got Councillor Rhodes next. Alan, please.
Thank you, Richard. As you'd expect, I'm going to save most of what I want to say until we meet again on the 25th to discuss the budget as a whole. I've got plenty I want to say, but I'm not going to rehearse it here. What I will say, I'll pick up on the issue that John's actually helpfully picked up on roads maintenance. I mean, it's astonishing that your expenditures exceeded 100 million since April 2017, and you're still being regarded as one of the worst in the country for highways maintenance. It's absolutely astonishing. And if money was ever misspent, that's a fine example of it. And frankly, on the paragraph 68, the roads maintenance renewals programme grant, the incentive grant, you'd be taking money under false pretences if you were to be granted that. Nobody believes that this council's demonstrated value for money in carrying out cost-effective improvements to the county's roads maintenance. In fact, most potholes have 2 or 3 visits before they're actually repaired permanently. So, and if that's effective maintenance, well, it simply isn't. And finally, on street lighting, on page 71, Richard, I remember when you were championing turning the lights off at 10 o'clock at night, switching them back on again at 6 o'clock in the morning under your previous administration when you were the finance portfolio holder. Thank goodness you were voted out and you weren't able to do that, and that the people of Nottinghamshire voted quite clearly against that proposal. And I'm glad that you've continued our policy of fitting energy saving lanterns on our street lights. It turned out to be exactly the right thing to do. So other than that, nothing really, but we'll keep our powder dry until the 25th. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I mean, I have to say, I do think we're getting value for money in what was being spent on the roads and the record of investment that's been spent on the roads, but there's an awful lot of work to do. But it is. I would say we're now not seeing half the money made by Via going off to Cornwall, because we took Via back entirely in-house, and why it was ever vested 51% in Cornwall, I'll never know. However, I've now got Gordon Wheeler, please.
Thank you, Richard. Just briefly to drop back to discussions we've had about roads and pavements, etc., and street lighting. Tom would know, because he was at the recent Community and Development Place Committee meeting. There was a fairly lengthy, if possibly slightly heated discussion about roads and their conditions, etc. Tom's smiling. What I would say, but obviously we've got election coming, for those who hadn't realised that. What happens thereafter and the committee structure is up for debate. But clearly, it's you mentioned just now, Richard, about referring his queries back to John and his committee. But my committee works, as Tom knows, very closely with a committee in place. If there's a need to review some of what you've just been saying today, when a new structure is in place with different administration, we're not getting into politics in this discussion, not with me anyway, there's something we could look at. And I'm sure that's possible. It'll be a joined up working. If both committees are still in place the way they are, that's something I think we should be taking forward. That's why both committees are there. If that's agreeable, I'd say decisions can't be made now, but perhaps it can be put in the back burner to be brought forward to the front at the right time. Thank you, Richard.
Quite right, Gordon. You're right, and technology moves on all the time, so we need to keep on top of the game, don't we, to give the best service. Keith Girling, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I know this is getting on to roads, really, and I don't know if this is the right forum for it. I'd just like to say, my first 8 years term as a councillor, I've had more of my roads done in my patch now in this current system than I ever did in those 8 years prior. So from my point of view, the system's working a lot better than it ever had done. There's some streets I had in my patch that you would not buy eggs and drive down there. Yeah, I've got roads now that they've done properly. So I think yeah, like when you're spending that amount of money, can you account for every penny of it? Is it all being spent properly? Do mistakes get made? Of course they do. And you've got to be a complete utter moron not to understand that. Yeah, but we are doing all we can, and I think to question the ability of our staff and to do their job properly isn't right. I think they do a wonderful job. We're giving them the money to be able to get on with that, and they're working through a massive backlog, and they're getting there. Yeah, and we're not having the best weather for them to do that. We've had COVID getting in the way as well. So actually, you know, good on them, and I hope they continue to improve and progress. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Keith. You make a good point. I've got Councillor Ogle next, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Chairman, that the rural roads were a single vehicle. You could only get a single vehicle on some of my inter-village roads because the potholes that were being done were only in the middle 2 or 3 meters. So one of the reasons that the number of potholes fixings has gone up is because they fixed all the side of the roads. So when you pulled off, if you weren't careful, you damaged all your springs in the deep potholes at the side. Well, I think now that the springs are safe in a lot of my patch, but I will say a lot of the budget has gone into improved drainage and improved maintenance of the highway chambers as well. And if you get water on your road and in those potholes that have been fixed, the water manages to get in, the frost pushes it out. And we've had quite a severe winter again. So this is the time of year when you expect there to be a requirement for maintenance. And I certainly think things have improved, and well, definitely improved in our area anyway, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I can't see anybody else asking to speak. Tom, have you put your hand up again? Yeah, come on, briefly then.
Yeah, just to briefly come back, I think it's really great to hear that the Conservative areas have been getting their roads resurfaced in Newark. I think that's all I got from Councillor Girling's comments, and I think really, I feel he was arguing probably our point. The whole point is there's been one road resurfaced in the whole of Sutton in Ashfield. 50,000 people live in Sutton, and there was one road resurfaced. It was a side street of 50 homes in my division, which I appreciate, but I'd rather have had the main road done, frankly. And more investments made in the area. But to say quite shamingly that you've had some money that's clearly sparing elsewhere across Mansfield and Ashfield particularly, I think is frustrating. But going back to Gordon's comments, I really appreciate that, and I think he hit the nail on the head exactly how I feel. I think whether we're working under a potentially changed structure or the current structure, I think we probably need, whichever administration it might be, to have a bit of a refocus on potentially how a better way of working would be. or at least a refocused way of working. But I agree fully with what Gordon said. And with regards to the officers, just to make clear, I think we're very blessed in Nottinghamshire to have some of the best officers anywhere in the country, and I think anybody will know the early morning or late night calls or complicated calls we make to Nigel and his team. He seemingly has an answer every time, so I think it's a great job. But we just don't ask his wife about any gritting problems, because I've heard she's pretty sterling at clearing the road with grit. So we might need to rope her into our team here, Mr. Chairman. But thank you. Thanks for the comments.
Okay, thank you, Tom. If we are concentrating on Conservative areas, it's the Conservative constituencies in Nottinghamshire, so I don't apologise for that now that they're all Conservative. I've got Councillor Pringle next, Mike.
Yeah, you fired that one across the bow there, Richard. Well done. I would just say, moving away from potholes and just ask a straightforward, simple question, that you are absolutely standing 100% behind the report as it's presented today. I know what your answer is going to be, but just for my own clarification, that you are standing as it's been presented today, please.
In my name, Mike, as the report to Council on the 25th will be in my name, so absolutely, yeah, happy to say that. Keith, did you want to briefly come back, and then I think we're ready for a vote?
Yeah, just very quickly. It's clarification really. So it's been stated that one road has been resurfaced in the whole of Ashfield in 4 years. So that's what you said, because I've written it down. Yeah, I don't actually believe that. And actually, haven't we been told as councillors to put in names of roads that we feel we want in our patch to be resurfaced? So, you know, they make statements like one road and it just happened to be his patch. Well, I'm sorry, even if it's in 1 year, that can't be right. I just don't believe it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, I mean, this isn't the place committee, but I think the record will show what's been resurfaced and where. And I think we've been over this so many times and demonstrated that by length of road in each of the districts, it's very fairly apportioned across the county when you take into account condition as well. With that, I'm going to ask Martin to take it to a vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Clark, for, against or abstaining?
Abstain.
Councillor Girling?
For.
Councillor Hollis?
Sit.
Again.
Could you repeat that, Councillor Hollis? Your audio broke up.
Against.
Councillor Richard Jackson?
Yeah, for.
Councillor Roger Jackson?
For.
Councillor Kerry?
For.
Councillor Meal?
Abstain.
Councillor Ogle?
For.
Councillor Pringle?
Abstain.
Councillor Rhodes?
Abstain.
Councillor Wheeler?
For.
That'll be carried then, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So I'll move on to item 5, which is the financial monitoring report for period 9. I'll move the recommendation, which is on page 38.
Second, Chairman.
Thank you, John. And I'll open this up. I'll first invite Nigel, if there's anything to add to the report. Nigel.
I'll keep it brief. Thank you, Chairman. So table 1 on page 4 indicates the council's anticipated forecast outturn is an underspending of 7.4 million. Significant variances in adult social care and public health and personnel committees are set out in the report. As we know, it's been one of the more interesting years for monitoring the budget, with significant additional costs and the revealing of additional financial support throughout the year. The council will continue to monitor the impacts of COVID-19 upon its finances, and work will continue to confirm with both the COVID-19 and non-COVID-19 related costs. The table on page 2 sets out the current position on the government funding. This is a changing picture, as colleagues will be aware, which will mean that it's almost out of date as soon as it's published, as further announcements are made on funding. Turning to the capital programme, table 3 on page 7 sets out the expected variation in the capital programme is 9 million. There's significant variation being on the slippage on the school programme, places programme, and slippage on 2 Homes England funded projects and policy committee. Paragraph 27 sets out the request to vary the capital programme to reflect the slippage of 1.3 million in a programme in children's. And as usual, the report updates members on Treasury management activities. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nigel. And I just to thank you and your team, really, despite enormous pressure on council services over the last year or so, keeping the finances on a sound footing for us, as the paper shows. Are there any questions, any comments on the paper? Okay. Was that, are you indicating, Tom? Councillor Hollis, please.
Just a very brief comment regards to contingency. First, Nigel, thank you for the report. With regards to contingency budget, would that the budget that we've budgeted for the COVID committee, Chairman, and the budget there? And if not, has it been included in this year's budget to continue, or is it only a one-year chairmanship, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hollis. It's a good question. Yeah, we budget in the revenue budget each year an element for contingency to cover sort of like in-year variations. There's an element particularly for redundancy cost if there are any redundancies, and we'll meet those from central budgets. And then as things develop through the year that we didn't know when we agreed the budget in February, we can then allocate amounts out. Some of that is within my gift if it's below 50,000, or it's a committee approval, and that's why you see occasionally the requests for allocations from the contingency. But and any underspend will just go back into general balances or be set aside for transformation projects. But each year, when you agree the budget, we agree an amount that we'll set aside in a contingency to manage those unforeseen circumstances in the year.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Are you happy with that answer? Yeah.
Well, just to say, are we continuing with the COVID committee in this budget and the financial implications associated with it? That was just the second part of the question.
I assume that will be up to the new administration in terms of how the committee structure is, Councillor Hollis. So whether it continues or it doesn't will be as a matter for the general meeting, I imagine, in May after the elections.
But the budget assumes no change, and any change.
The budget assumes no change, and that budget and that committee doesn't have its own separate budget.
Yeah. So if there was a change post-election, there would either be a saving or there would be a call on contingencies in the following year to fund anything that might be additional. Okay.
That's
Thank you for that. I can't see anybody else indicating on item 5. If there is nobody, I'll again ask to take us to a vote, please, Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Clark, for, against, or abstaining?
Support.
Councillor Girling?
For.
Councillor Hollis?
For.
Councillor Jackson? Councillor Richard Jackson?
For.
Councillor Roger Jackson?
For.
Councillor Kerry?
For.
Councillor Meal?
For.
Councillor Ogle?
For.
Councillor Pringle?
For.
Councillor Rhodes?
For.
Councillor Wheeler?
For.
That's carried unanimously then, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. So we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the procurement green paper, and I'll ask Councillor Victoria if there's anything, Councillor, that you want to add to the report.
Thank you, Chair. So just briefly, public sector procurement, as colleagues may be aware, are subject to public contract regulations, as we call PCR. As the UK is no longer part of the EU, the Cabinet Office has published a green paper at middle of December, asking for proposals and consultation comments. Paragraph 8 onwards just sort of summarises the key points. I didn't want to make this report too technical, but essentially it's consolidating 3 different types of regulations that we have into a consolidated streamline approach. In terms of the procurement procedures that we follow, again, it's moving from 7 different types to 3 quite straightforward procedures. There's some further changes proposed as well around transparency. So looking at an introduction of a new centralised platform to gather information and documents of all phases of the procurement process, from planning award to execution, and also a centralised register to hold details of all suppliers. So at the moment we have a lot of burden put on SMEs, particularly having to register each time for different authorities when they're looking to bid for a tender opportunity. Here they'd register once into a centralised register, and we would just pull the details off there. What we'd want to make sure is, our local supplier base is developed and promoted as part of our procurement strategy. And then finally, there's a section in the Green Paper around fast tracking the approach to the litigation and sort of challenge on procurement decisions. And we just want to make sure whether that has an implication in terms of challenges to contracting authorities. So in summary, whilst the Green Paper provides an opportunity to streamline and consolidate the multiple routes to procurement, which we'd welcome, I guess some of the key reservations that we'd be wanting to highlight would be the additional administration and bureaucracy that would be put on contracting authorities, and that's not unique to Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. It'd be across the board, across the country, and we just need to sort of have a sensitive balance of that, particularly around not sharing commercially sensitive data when we're being asked to publish everything in the public domain. And obviously there's an impact on retraining for commissioners, procurement teams, legal teams, etc. So really this report is asking members for any further action that might need, that you think would be necessary, and then for myself to respond to the consultation in consultation with the chair of the committee. But I'll stop there and happy to take any questions or comments.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kaj. And really, if there are any additions that we'd like to see as a part of the council's response to this consultation, but equally conscious that we should probably share that, Alan, with group leaders before it's sent back to government. I think the main thing is, I'm sure we'd all welcome a streamlining of procedures, but at the same time, we particularly want to make sure that we're not losing our ability to prioritise local suppliers and to retain the advances we've made in local spend, and if we can help our current list of suppliers to actually get onto some of these national suppliers lists, then it may be of benefit to them. But I think, and I'm sure we'd all agree, we don't want to lose that local element that we've got in our current supply chain. So I'll open this up. I think, Tom, your hand was up first, and then I've got Councillor Pringle. So, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members might be aware, I know you all probably tune into Ashfield Council meetings every time they're on, but we actually passed a motion through the most recent Ashfield Council calling for this very thing. And it's actually something I feel very strongly about. And certainly Ashfield independents do. I wholeheartedly disagree with the Green Paper. Wholeheartedly. I think it's something that, Mr. Chairman, by the sounds of it, you do as well. And I think we need to actually lobby the government to make sure that they let us prioritise local. Because let me be clear, Mr. Chairman, I've read this Green Paper, I've read every word of it. And what it does is, we are leaving the EU, is the whole reason we've got to have this Green Paper. I thought that meant that we could buy British, prioritise local. Of course, if we chose to, we can go elsewhere. That allows us the flexibility to choose. Because previously, Mr. Chairman, you'll be aware that when we advertise for a contract, we legally have to advertise it to all across Europe, whether we want to or not. And if a supplier comes forward from Germany, for example, Ashfield Council was lumbered into buying German play parks because no other UK supplier could compete with them, something that we'd like to change. But we were forced into it because of the procurement process. I'm now told by this Green Paper that we don't just have to advertise legally across Europe in exactly the same way. We now have to legally advertise across the whole world. So seemingly Brexit, and one of the big cornerstones, whether you supported Brexit or not a debate for now, one of the benefits that came out of leaving the EU was the fact that we could choose and we weren't hampered by the red tape. And now I'm told by some sort of childlike negotiation we seemingly had on the way coming out, that none of this was negotiated, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to encourage officers to firstly read the motion that was passed at Ashfield Council, which calls the government to actually reconsider this and allow us to choose local. Because damn right, Mr. Chairman, if we want to choose someone from Nottinghamshire, they might not meet pounds and pence, but those people support local jobs. Those people are local suppliers, and it's a lot more environmentally friendly for things not to travel all across Europe or the world, or even the other side of the country, if we can buy local. But we as local representatives shouldn't be hampered in any way, shape or form for making the decisions of our taxpayers' money that we choose to. And the European Union did that to us before. This green paper does exactly that again. And I seriously hope we can get something done about it. And I welcome the report coming to the committee today, so actually we can all discuss this. Because as the Finance and Property Committee, we should, as I've said, be able to prioritise Nottinghamshire and local jobs. For all the reasons I've said, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate I'm quite passionate about this subject. Other people might have an opinion on it as well. But I think my comments are quite clear, and I really hope, Kaj, if it's possible with the chairman, you could include some of those comments if the committee feel minded to make clear that we do want to promote local people and local businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I think that's helpful, and as I say, we will distribute this amongst the group leaders before we send this response off. But I think as well, this to me shouldn't just be a response that goes off to the department. We'll copy this to the Nottinghamshire members of Parliament as well, so they're fully aware of what our views are. Because I'm sure they want to see as much local spending what we're purchasing. Like, we've got a lot of spending power. It's local jobs and it's the local economy. So I should think. And we're pushing it an open door on that. Kaj, is there anything you want to pick up on from that before I bring to you?
No, I think we'll make sure we feed those comments through. I guess what I would say is that when we do advertise any tender, they're all facets of criteria that we look at, and local spend is a key factor within that. Yes, all organisations from all across the world would apply. But where we do say local spend matters, that is a key criteria, and we would factor that in across our evaluation. So, and as you've said, we've been doing really well on that. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to come back briefly, Tom.
Yeah, just briefly, and I propose Kaj has provided a nice little double act there for exactly the point. So helpful. Thank you. But no, that's exactly the point. It's a criteria, and it's like any points-based system. Local spend is just one element to the points-based system. It shouldn't be in any way, shape or form a points-based system. As if I want to have a kitchen fitted, I'll pick who I want to have the kitchen fitted by. And if I have to pay a bit more because it's the guy I know and trust, that's who I want to have it done by. And it should work in exactly the same way with how you, Mr. Chairman, as the administration, as this council wants to do things. We shouldn't be hampered. And it's the whole system that I think needs to change on this. And obviously, this is a chance for us to feed into the consultation. And to be clear, now we are out of Europe. I don't see any way that we should have to be hampered by the old style rules. So that's really my view. And I think Kaj kind of summarised it very well in what she said there. But just want to be clear on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I should say, as much as we were constrained by the European rules, actually, we still managed to do a good job of getting local spend in. So, it was possible within that constraint, and I think there's fewer constraints in the new system, even if it's far from perfect. So we should be even better able to do that. But I mean, these are all good points that we'll make sure are part of it. Keith, I think I've got you next, and then Mike Pringle. Keith.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think when I was the chairman of the Economic Development Committee last time I was a councillor, this is one of the things that I championed, if you like, about local spend. I think it's vitally important that every advantage is given to our local businesses, because I think at the time it was £3 back into the local economy for every pound we spend, and that's a massive amount of regeneration coming in. I think we've got I think we've done a great job in making sure, even during the European Union rules, is making sure we've spent as much as possible as we could locally. I think now we've got an even bigger advantage to try and make that happen. And I think Tom sort of covered it slightly in his what he was saying, but that the carbon footprint of what we buy should become a major factor, particularly as we're aiming to be a carbon neutral council. So we can weigh that up in terms of the priority in terms of what we want. So if we've then got two factors now, i.e. carbon footprint and spend local, that's going to give our businesses quite a big advantage on that, and I think that's only proper. I think just to remind people, I think, and I might be wrong and I'm happy to be corrected here, I think the reason these procurement rules came in the first place was because of the bad old days when the local councillor got the local contract, a contract, and got a brown envelope for it. So yes, there's got to be safeguards in place so that we can't be accused of that, because we are anyway. I mean, Christ almighty, the amount of times I'm accused of having a brown envelope because something that's happened in the council that I've not even known about, the mind when we got any money for, you know, I mean, look, no paper cuts on my fingers. So I think we just got to be very clear on why we're doing what we're doing. We've got to follow what it is. This is a consultation paper. Yeah, we've got to put strong report in to say what we believe is the best way for us to spend our money locally, because yes, we've got a responsibility to spend for best value, but there's also that economic development element to it, which sometimes conflicts with the procurement element. Yeah, and it's about weighing that up to make sure that we get the maximum return, either by what we spend or what we get in the long term with it. And so it's not an easy thing. It's a fine line sometimes to go down. And I think as long as we put our, you know, 10 pence in terms of that, I think it'll go a long way to helping. Because as you said, I don't think our members of parliament want it all to be spent elsewhere. You know, they want their residents, their constituents working. And that's how we do it. So I'm all for this paper coming to the committee. I think it's good that it's come here and that we've been given the opportunity to put our point of view across. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Keith. I told officers at pre-agenda that you'd have a lot to say on this, and you haven't let me down. So thank you for that, and it's all useful feedback. And I've got Councillor Pringle next, Mike, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. And thanks, Kaj, for the report. I think we all recognise that clarity and ease of understanding needs to come forward. And I think that's exactly what it does. Really pleased, Richard, that you're going to offer it to the leaders of the councils, and obviously I'm assuming that will include those non-aligned independents and liberals to have a read of. So we're all fully addressed with it. And I think Tom does pick out some good points, but I think that will come through in the consultation. So I'm very pleased to receive it. To be honest, Tom, I think as all members will have read the paper in detail, some of our European members may well have struggled to understand paragraph 7 with a slight mistake in it, but other than that, absolutely 100% support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Unless there's anybody, John, sorry, apologies, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Can I ask Councillor Girling to remove that remark about brown envelopes? It's an attack on the integrity of majority of councillors in this country, and you know, I'd hope he'd withdraw that. I don't feel happy with that being said in a meeting. You know, it's all persuasions. It's not politically Labour or anything else, but it did, you know, sort of give an indication there. And for the person on the outside looking at it, they'd think, well, what the hell's going off here? You're all on the fiddle or something. So I'd ask him to remove that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Keith, did you want to say anything?
If you want me to come back, I didn't say that. I said people, if you don't have these rules in place, you get accused of it. This is a safeguarding us so that we're not accused of it. Yeah, when anything happens that people don't want to happen or they don't understand what has happened and it involves money, the first response is, oh, they're on the take. Right? We're not. And these are the things in place that make sure that we can't be accused of it. So I'm not accusing us of doing that. Of course I'm not. I'm actually saying this is helping us to make sure that those accusations don't come towards us. That's why they were put there in the first place. That's why, because in the bad old days, you only have to look in the bad old days, it did happen. These all came in to stop it happening, and rightly so. Yeah, and this paper is so that we can get a good balance in terms of our influence in local spend, so that we're not accused of actually doing anything inappropriate, and we can do it in a way that it's very transparent because it's part of our rules and procedures. That's a good thing.
Thank you, Keith. I think that's
Thanks,
clarified.
Chairman. Rest my case.
I think for me, Keith, I think that clarified exactly what you said, and you were making sure a safeguard exists. So, unless there's anybody else, I can't see anybody else. In which case, I'll ask Martin to take us through a vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Clark for. Against.
For.
Councillor Girling.
For.
Councillor Hollis.
For.
Councillor Richard Jackson.
For.
Councillor Roger Jackson.
For.
Councillor Kerry.
For.
Councillor Meal.
For.
Councillor Ogle.
For.
Councillor Pringle.
For.
Councillor Rhodes.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. So I'll move on to item 7, which is DN2 STARS programme supporting children and people to achieve resilience and success. We've got Lynn Brammer with us again to introduce the report. Lynn, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. The DN2 STARS programme is a jointly commissioned service that supports children and young people in local care and those at the edge of care across Nottinghamshire, Nottingham City and Derby City. This was procured as an investor-provider consortium, is being delivered through a social impact bond. Social impact bonds are a model where socially motivated investors fund the upfront cost to a provider to deliver the service. Payment to the Investor Provider Forum is then made by DN2 on achievement of successful outcomes. DN2 bid for and were successful in securing £3 million of government funding, and this will contribute to 25% of the payments made in relation to successful outcomes. The provider for this service is Outcomes for Children, and they are part of the Polaris Group, who were formerly Core Assets Group. Both Polaris and Futures Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Youth Support Limited have invested in this programme. The investors fund the provider regardless of whether they achieve the outcomes or not. Fast forward to operational delivery, which began last September, and the attached appendices to this report show the minimum number of referrals and the cohorts of young people to be supported during the life of the programme. Appendix 2 shows the payment mechanism. So those young people referred into the STARS programme will remain supported for a number of weeks. The final appendix shows the number of active cases we had at December 2020, along with the referral pipeline. At the last operational contract board in January, and the operational contract board takes place monthly at the moment, it was noted that referrals continue to be ramped up, and although in the first quarter of delivery the programme was under target, quarter 2 is expected to be on target, and our first claim to the Life Chances Fund for the grant will be in quarter 3. I'm just going to pass you along to Anne Lobley, who's a placements officer in commissioning in Children's Services, just to talk through a little bit about the operational aspects of the programme. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, just to give you a brief update on how we're progressing with the programme at the moment, which, as Lynn said, only went live at the end of September. We've seen a really positive start on the programme. We have currently got 6 live cases. The programme launch is being supported with a comprehensive comms plan. That's involved myself and the service manager from Polaris Children's Service, joining team meetings for our social care teams just to provide a presentation and some information on the programme and what would make an appropriate referral for children and young people to join the programme. It is a 2-year long-term intervention, so we need to make sure we're getting the right cases coming through to make sure that they're each successful. We're getting a good range of referrals from across the social care teams, so the children in care teams, court teams, child protection teams and our disability team have all made referrals. We've had almost 50 referrals. Not all of those are transferring into ongoing inquiries, but it's indicating and evidencing the fact that our social care teams are aware of this, and we're making some good progress. Another added benefit, which we're really chuffed about, is that one of our care leavers has actually applied for and been appointed to a post with Polaris Children's Services. One of the roles with the projects team is as a peer mentor. As I say, one of our young care leavers has applied and been appointed, so that's really exciting. We're expecting Lauren to be starting to work with us in her new role the end of this month, I think, or the beginning of April. So I kind of think that's my update, but very happy to take any questions.
Right, thank you very much, both of you for that. That's really useful. Just very quickly, if there's anyone from IT, there was a warning on my screen to say that this meeting finished in 5 minutes. This was about 4 minutes ago, so someone can just assure me I'm not about to be...
No, I think it crops up a lot, Chairman. Towards end of meetings, it comes up and says you're due to finish soon, but I don't think it's a problem.
Maybe it's trying to hurry us along. Okay, thank you. I think this is excellent news. It's great to see this has got started, and particularly on the news that there's some success in a care leaver coming into the programme as well. I think that's great. The recommendation is a little open. It asks us to consider further updates. I was going to suggest, you mentioned September was the live date for this. I was going to suggest this is something that comes back to us around about September. Just because it might normally say a bit sooner, but just to think with the pandemic and things, we should have something meaningful around about September. I know if other members are happy with that. I'll move that as a recommendation for now, and I'll just open it up. I've got...
Formally seconded, Chairman.
Thank you, John. I've got Councillor Pringle, so Mike.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to pass our congratulations on to Lauren. I think it's important to recognise that. So from us all, if Lynn and Anne would do that, I think we'd all feel grateful.
Happy to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I've got Councillor Kerry first and then Alan Rhodes. So, Eric.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Welcome this report. Really good, the opportunity here to improve people's lives. Just in terms of coming back and reporting, it's not just about spending the money, it's about outcomes. So when you do report back, it'd be very good to see the kind of outcomes that you've achieved and some of the successes, please.
Yeah, happy to do that, Councillor. I think by September we'll have had quite a few young people on through their journey, not to use expat to speak, but we should be able to show some of the outcomes, because we've had some small outcomes already with the cases that are already live. So by September we should be in a better position to do that.
Okay, thank you for that. So Councillor Rhodes, Alan, please.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Yes, it is a good news report, and we should welcome it. I'm interested in talking about the report back as well. And I fully agree with Eric about the need to see some outcomes in that report. I hear what you've just suggested, Chairman, that we don't get a report until September, which is an awful long way off. It's 7 months away. But I would have liked an earlier report. But if you want to go with September, what I'd say there on in is that we have a quarterly report, because I think to start going for twice yearly reports, frankly, is not worthwhile. So I think a quarterly report after the September. I'll not make a fuss about September, although I do believe it's a long way off. But I think after that we need to be looking at a quarterly report.
Yeah. Thank you. Obviously there'll be a new committee at some point after May, but as long as it's anything to do with me, I think we'll keep a very close eye on it. If it needs to come to committee sooner than September, we'd certainly bring it back. But I'll leave it at September for now. I appreciate that. Keith, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's a curiosity more than anything. We've seen in Appendix 1 how many referrals we've had from the city. The cities and hers, basically. I just wondered what the breakdown is within the county, because I'm just curious more than anything to see how it's spread across. Because there's two ways of looking at those figures, I assume. One, it's great that we've got that many kids at referral, but then there's two, is it bad that we need to refer that many kids? You see what I mean? So, and I just think it'd be very interesting to see where those referrals come from. So we maybe look at targeting things there. Thank you.
Yeah, fair point.
Do you want to pick that up, Anne?
Yeah, do you want me to go?
Yeah.
So I think it's good. I think it's positive that we get the referrals. Just a bit of an explanation of the different cohorts. So cohort A is for children and young people who are currently living in residential children's homes, and the outcome is for them to move to a fostering placement. So I'd be supporting as many cohort A referrals as we can get through the door. Similarly with cohort B, that's about stabilising children within a foster placement where there might be a risk of them stepping up to a residential placement. So again, really positive. Cohort C is reunification. So where it's safe to do so, reunifying those children home with sort of birth family, whether that's parents or extended family members. And cohort D is the one where it's those edge of care referrals, and so we're supporting families who need a bit of extra support for their children to remain at home. Those children are on the edge of care due to those issues within the family home. So again, I think it's a positive intervention that we can support and stop those children coming into care wherever possible. In terms of the referrals that we've got through so far, we've currently got 5 live referrals in our cohort B, so fostering stabilisation placements, and we've got 1 reunification case at the moment. But we've got a number of others in the pipeline, and specifically we've got 3 within the cohort A that are a long way down sort of the inquiry process. So I think we've made a good start within Nottinghamshire, and I think all of the referrals are positive.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I've got Alan. I've got your hand still. Is that?
Just come back.
Yes, of course you can, Keith. Yeah.
Sorry, just to come back.
Sorry,
Thanks
Chairman,
for that. Thanks for that and answering my question in a way you don't make me look as stupid as I was, because it doesn't really matter where they are then, does it? Because it's all about the fostering and where the homes are. So thank you for being very polite in letting me know it's a stupid question. Thank you.
There's no stupid question.
No such thing.
Oh, give him a minute. He'll find it.
You've not been to enough of these meetings, obviously.
Okay. Thanks very much for that then. I guess we do need to take it to a vote. So Martin, would you just take us through a vote if there's nobody else?
Okay then, Chairman. So you've moved for this to be updated in September or earlier if it needs to. Have I got that right?
That's right.
Okay. Right. So Councillor Clark, for, against or abstaining?
For.
Councillor Girling?
For.
Councillor Hollis?
For.
Councillor Richard Jackson?
For.
Councillor Roger Jackson?
For.
Councillor Kerry?
For.
Councillor Meal?
For.
Councillor Ogle?
For.
Councillor Pringle?
For.
Councillor Rhodes?
For.
Councillor Wheeler?
For.
It's carried, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed. So the final item 8 is the work programme, which I'll move. I'll ask if there are any questions, any additions. John?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I did ask last month about domestic abuse support services, if we could up that through the work programme, but it appears to be in the same place as it was last month.
It does. Kaj, are you still with us? Okay, I don't think
there might be a reason, Chair, but if not, see if we can do
Nigel,
it.
is there anything you can tell us on that?
Yeah, I think it's about the timing of when the contract is let.
Right.
So that it will come to us in terms of where it is in the process for letting. There's no point in bringing it any earlier because we want to have gone out through the tender process in terms of picking who it is. So I think that was the reason.
So it's contract sensitive then?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, sorry, John. Yeah.
John, were you looking at something that was more to do with the current service and spending?
I mean, as I mentioned last month, Chair, or the last meeting, that every day we're seeing this and awful stories on the television locally, printed press, etc. And I just thought we need to show some, real attention to it. But I can understand if it is a contractual thing more than anything else. But if it is at all possible to discuss where we are and how we're going with it, then I'd welcome that. But I do understand if it's down to contracts.
Okay, thanks for that. Is there anybody else, any comments on the work programme? If not, I think we can do that vote exception. So unless anybody is against, which I can't see, I'll then take that as carried and I'll close the meeting. Thanks all very much for your time.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Bye.
Thank
Bye
you,
all.
Chairman.
We get a weather update at 11 o'clock from the Met Office through to our gritting controller at Newark. He'll relay that message to the four foremen, which I'm one of, and then we relay that down to our crew that we are in charge of. That'll give you the time that we're supposed to be in the yard, the spread rate that we're supposed to be spreading at, and the weather forecast and what they're expecting and what time we're going out due to the weather. We go out with a said lorry full of salt, could be up to 10-12 tons on the back, and away you go. You spread it down, and you want to be putting it down a couple of hours at least before the forecast of it's going to drop cold to help the traffic crush it down into the tarmac. And then hopefully when it goes freezing, it'll not freeze, it just moistens it up again nicely. It's all down to the weight of the traffic and everything else. It's quite a pleasure to be out there. You know you're doing the best that you can. You're putting the salt out there. You're trying to make the roads safe. You're just in your own little world. You know what you've got to do. You put the radio on, heater's nice and warm, and you're away and enjoying it, and off you go. It's peaceful.